was developed by the Benson Institute, and we're kind of, when I was trying to decide how to grow in Idaho, as I moved from Houston, I have no idea how to grow in Idaho, right? Obviously, I need to be able to control the temperature. There are 6 laws of plant growth. The first law is light. Without light, direct sunlight, you don't get photosynthesis. Without photosynthesis, the plant cannot process the nutrients in the soil, even if all the nutrients that the plant needs are in the soil. It can't do the chemical processing, turning that into usable nutrients for the plant. Without the nutrients, you're going to get little or no fruit production. Okay? So that's why light is the most important of the 6 laws of plant growth. The second most important law is temperature. And that's where the Walipini really shines, is temperature, being able to regulate temperature. As a matter of fact, the Benson Institute says the primary goal in building a Walipini is to have a stable growing area where you can have temperature and light. Okay? So the Walipini was designed for, in this book, and this is a revised edition for 2002, was developed for La Paz, Bolivia. La Paz, Bolivia is 16 degrees south of the equator. So if this is the equator and you're 16 degrees south of it, the sun's going to be pretty much straight down. Mm-hmm. If you're in Idaho Falls, Idaho, you're 43 degrees north of the equator, so we're about 60 degrees off from La Paz. And the sun's going to be coming down like this. All right? So we have to keep that in mind as we talk about, the Benson's Institute's, the 2 most important things is light and temperature. So I think they understand that in plant growth. So how do we apply what they're doing in Bolivia to Idaho, right? And because if we can control the temperature, then that's a big issue. But we also have to have light. Now, let me just. So here is, according to the Benson Institute, for La Paz, Bolivia, you need to take their latitude, which is 16 south, and add 23 degrees to that. So they end up with 39 degrees for the slope of the roof. Now that's really, really critical because you want to optimize it for the winter sun. When are you trying to get growth? When are you trying to capture the most amount of heat is during the winter. So if you have the sun coming in at a 90-degree angle to that plastic or glass, whatever it is, you're going to have penetration. It's going to go through. Is your friend still?
She's here.
She's here? Okay, good. So in order to get that same 90-degree angle, does that make sense? Because what we're trying to do, and the reason why the Benson Institute says you have to be down a minimum of 6 feet to 8 feet, is because you're trying to use all of this mass, this dirt, as a battery. You're trying to get as much sunlight down to the soil on the bottom and on the walls, especially the north wall here in north of the equator, and you're trying to hold that energy so when it gets cold at night, it releases it and keeps things from freezing. So this all makes perfect sense. Okay. So here, if we're going to do the same math, the wall, the glass here or the roof here in Idaho Falls area needs to be at 66 degrees. So we have that same 90-degree penetration. Make sense?
Yeah.
All of the Walipinis that I've seen here in Idaho have about this 40-degree angle on it. All right. Now, if we want to, by putting this 66-degree angle on it in Idaho or this 39-degree angle on it in Bolivia, it also optimizes it for the summer sun because you don't want to be packing that thing full of heat during the summer, right? you still want to be growing in it. You want to be able to control that temperature. Now, I went to a neighbor's garden here, and one hailstorm this last summer annihilated a year's worth of growing. All right? So you still want to be able to grow in a protected covering if possible. So if you have this low angle here in the summer, here in La Paz, the sun's going to change its angle and it's actually going to bounce off. So it's going to reduce the amount of heat, which is perfect. And if you have the same 66-degree angle here in Idaho, of course the sun's coming from a lot higher angle during the summer, right? It's going to bounce off and you're going to reduce the amount of heat inside of there so it doesn't get too hot. Unfortunately, the ones I've seen, the angle's about like this, not like this. Now, what does a 66-degree angle look like? Well, this is about a 66-degree angle. And I don't know where that was built, but you can see that they're going to get pretty good light penetration during the winter, and then as the sun goes up, it's going to just reflect off. So that's really what we're looking for, is maximum light penetration, so we get that energy into the soil, and we store that in the soil. Now, something that's in the Fence Institute manual says that it's important. Let me just get the proper verbiage. I'm not misquoting. It says locating the growing area. Okay, growing area means where you get the plants planted, right? 6 to 8 feet underground and capturing and storing daylight solar radiation are the most important principles in building a successful Walipini. So why do you want to have the plants 6 to 8 feet down on the ground?
Probably that's where below the frost line, or where the warmth of the earth is affecting them.
Okay, why not have them 4 feet up?
You lose that, I guess.
You would lose that, wouldn't you?
That benefit.
The whole principle behind the Walipini is to capture the heat into the soil. Okay, now if you've got your plants 4 feet up in the ground, what are you also doing? You're casting shadow on your battery, the soil down there. And so that soil isn't going to retain the energy which is the whole purpose behind the Walipini.
David, so what time of year did you go see Kim's?
I saw his about 2 months ago when I moved here.
So we went in January and our feet froze. So what you're saying is so true, because he has those raised beds and our feet started to go numb, even though up in our heads and everything like that was in the direct sunlight was fine. Yeah. It was so cold.
Yeah, and he's got a beautiful Walipini.
It is beautiful.
It's a $20,000 Walipini.
It is.
It's about the size of this living room. Okay, and it's fabulous. It's impressive. And I'm trying to grow food for my family, and so I'm taking the principles that the Benson Institute specifically applies to building a Walipini, and that is capturing energy and light, the two main laws of plant growth. Okay, so probably what you noticed is your feet were cold because, again, his angle isn't the 66 degree.
Yeah, it's not steep. Well, it's steeper than Joseph's was. Joseph's was almost flat, but so it was steeper. But yeah, your feet just about froze to death.
Yeah. So
and then what do you do as far as your water table being at 5 feet?
Okay. So here's Kim's Walipini, and here's his angle, and here's 66 degrees.
Yeah.
Now, I want you to also notice where the shadow is.
Well, and it was a big deal, and that's why he raised his beds up so high, because he wasn't getting any sunlight to his plants if they were on the ground.
Right. Okay. So the Walipini is a great concept at the equator. All right. So and then here's Joseph's, and again, you have to and here's the angle. And there's 66 degrees, and here's angle. So what is happening to the sun when he needs it the most?
Bouncing.
It's bouncing. You're going to have cold feet, and you're going to have cold soil, and you can't grow the plants in the dirt and here because the soil is cold.
Mm-hmm.
And why is it cold in Kim's and Joseph's? Because they're not even letting the sun in, and they may not be aware of this. But they've spent all the time and effort and money and resources to build these, but you have to apply the principles. If I
Your
give
location.
right, and in the book it says this. Actually, I don't want to misquote, so let me just read from the Benson Institute manual. It says the Walipini in the bulletin is designed specifically for the area of La Paz, Bolivia. However, the principles explained in the bulletin make it possible to build a Walipini in a wide variety of other geographic and climate conditions. So that's the good news. But you have to apply the principles that they teach in the book in order for it to be successful. So the first thing is getting the light in there so that we can control the temperature. Okay. The second thing is light to grow the plants. Again, no light, no photosynthesis, no nutrition, very low or minimal production. Now, I have grown gardens 5 different ways. I've done hydroponics. I've done back to Eden gardening. I've done layer lasagna gardening. We've done organic gardening. We've done the mitt-ladder gardening method. And as we were doing each of those one at a time, they were all producing. When I did all 5 of them at once, I had a comparison, and it was night and day. One gardening method completely decimated the results from the others. Without that comparison, I didn't know how minuscule. Okay, I was really proud of this cabbage that was this big. Then I compared it to a cabbage this big, 8 feet away in a different gardening method. So without having a side-by-side comparison, it's very easy to think you've got great production. And I have people tell me all the time, well, I don't even fertilize. I don't put anything. I just throw straw down, which is fertilizing, or I throw manure down, which is fertilizing, okay, or I put down compost, which is fertilizing. But I don't fertilize, and I have a great garden every year. Well, great is relative to how good could it be, right? So these 6 laws of plant growth have to be followed. If a plant can only be as productive as its greatest limiting factor. So we need nutrition for our bodies, for example, right? And let's say, for example, you have all the vitamins and minerals that you need except iron. How are you going to feel?
Lethargic,
Run down.
unhappy.
You can only be as healthy as the greatest limiting factor, right?
Right.
Does this make sense that it applies to plants?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you get the right temperature, which we're not getting in the Walipinis up here in Idaho, because I haven't seen one with a 66-degree roof that lets the light in, which allows the soil to be heated and retain the energy. That's going to be a limiting factor, isn't it? That's already going to reduce the productivity and the health of the plant. All right. So let's take a look at light. Now it's interesting when we go to the Benson Institute manual. Here's the cover. This is in La Paz, Bolivia. I want you to look at the shadows. Even in Bolivia, see where the shadow is? Right here. Look at the shadow here. It's a good 30 to 40% of the growing area. This right here. See that shadow coming down?
Oh yeah, from that side.
All right. So which plants love to grow in shadows?
Spinach.
None. None of them. The first law of plant growth is light. Without light, you don't have energy. Without energy, you don't have photosynthesis and so forth. Okay. So it's like growing in a forest floor. Okay. I mean, you get indirect light, but not enough light for the plant to fulfill the full measure of its creation. And so even in La Paz, when they're almost, they're only 16 degrees off of the equator, they're still having shadow. Now, unfortunately, if we go back, and I apologize for having to jump around here, but look at the shadow. It's almost from the front to the back of that garden, of that Walipini. So let's take a look at what I decided to do, because I'm spending a lot of time and money in developing how I want to garden here in Idaho. So I want to make sure I'm spending my money and time wisely. So what I did is I went out and photographed every hour on the hour my Geoair 8-foot deep garden pit. Okay, now of course I'm going to be growing, this is all going to be filled in, I'm going to be growing at ground level. Okay, but I thought this is a great example of a Walipini 8 feet deep in Idaho. All right, so this is 9 o'clock in the morning. This was taken 3 days ago. Sunrise was at 7:30. So this is actually 20 feet wide. Walipinis are generally 12 feet wide. So you can imagine a Walipini is going to be going up to about here. Okay. An hour and a half after sunrise, how much sun is getting into the garden pit?
None.
None. It's 100% in
And that's
shadow.
8 feet deep.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it ended up being 8 feet 3 inches, but the tubes are 4.5 inches, so they're at 8 feet. Okay. How much sun is at ground level? Total sun. So if I was growing above, if I could control the temperature above ground, I'd have direct sun from sunrise on, right? So this is an hour and a half after sunrise. Let's take a look at 10 o'clock. Nope. Let's see if we can get. Is that 10?
16.
Yeah, I'm going the wrong way then. Let me try it this way. Here's 10 o'clock. Okay.
You get about 50%.
About 50% of the entire 20-foot width. But again, how big is a Walipini? 12.
Still.
So I'm probably about 75% in shadow at 10. And this is I don't have a wall here, so all the light's going directly into the hole. How much of the soil is at the ground level in light? Okay, so let's take a look at 1 o'clock. I went from 10 to 1. Let me see if I can go this way. That's 9. 5, 4, 3, 2, 11. I don't know how we're. Okay, so here's 11 o'clock. We're at about 45% in shadow. Half my garden's shadow. 2 o'clock. I've got 30% in shadow. 3 o'clock, 30% still in shadow. 4 o'clock, now the sun's coming back, isn't it? Now I'm losing more. I'm at 40% in shadow. 5 o'clock, I'm in 95% in shadow because I get this one corner here, all right? And 6 o'clock, I'm back completely in shadow. So you want to have your plants in direct sunlight with the right temperature at 8, 10, 12, as many hours a day as possible. The biggest produce grown in the world is grown in Alaska during the summer when they have 16-hour days of direct sunlight or whatever it is, right?
Right.
So that's why I decided to use the Geoair concept. And that is because I can control the temperature without having to pay for cooling or heating.
Right.
And I'm applying the principles of going down 8 feet because that's where we have a consistent 55-degree temperature. So I'm applying that principle from the Walipini manual. But without planting my plants that far down and causing a shadow issue, I've got to raise the plants up so they have full sun. And that's if I were in La Paz, I wouldn't have too much of a concern. I'd probably still lose about 25% of the garden area because of the shadow. But here I'm losing at least 30%. Maximum I'm going to be able to get is going to be 70%. Okay, in the best scenario, and that's if I have the glass at the right angle and so forth. So what we're going to do here is we simply take the air, and this of course isn't finished. We'll be filling this in to ground level, and we'll take these 4 tubes. Those 4 tubes will go in a combiner box. We'll have a blower, and that'll be inside the hoop house. what my anticipation is this, is I'm going to start growing my tomatoes when people start growing tomatoes. You know, I'll probably start, well, actually, I'll start my plants right now. It's almost November. So I'll start my seeds now, and I'll plant my tomatoes now. And then they'll grow all the way through the summer. And then they'll grow and the plants are already established. They're already putting on fruit. And then I'll just grow them through winter. And I'll be able to continue harvesting the tomatoes. So it's going to be the easiest thing to do would be to grow your general cool weather crops, the greens, the lettuces, things that you mentioned. But the things that you love that you can only grow during the summer, just let them keep growing because they're already established and they're already producing.
So what you're saying, what you just said was really in line with Elliot Coleman, because that's what he said, started in the warm weather and let it go through the winter. But I guess his thing was don't be planting things in January because there's not enough light to get it to strong production. Whereas if you started in the fall, you have plenty of sunlight to just keep it alive.
Sure.
As long as you don't have really...
Keep it alive and still produce.
Right.
Right? I fully plan on eating tomatoes in December and January and February because they're already producing. The maturing will be slower. It needs light to mature. And so it'll take a little bit longer, but I'll have vine-ripe tomatoes all the way through winter, and the cucumbers and the melons and the squashes. Yeah. So let's. Any questions on what? Does this make sense? Is it confusing?